puppeteers and play the characters that you cheer. So join us as we go below the frame. On this episode of Below the Frame, I'm talking to Raleigh Crewson. She builds puppets, famous puppets. Lots of the iconic Sesame Street characters were built by Raleigh. Plus, she reveals the secret of the Muppet Stitch. We're also going to pay a visit to the injury corner and ask a puppeteer a question about not puppets. Come on, it's time to go below the frame. Go below the frame. Welcome to Below the Frame with me, Matt Vogel. Please rate and review our podcast if you're enjoying listening to it. We need those numbers to go up, up, up. We need the ratings numbers in order to get that big advertising deal. That's not true. I don't know what happens if this show gets 1 million great reviews and 5 stars or whatever. It's just a thing, okay? Anyway, I am talking today with Rollie Krewson, and as I mentioned in the tease, she is a puppet builder. She has worked for the Jim Henson Company before it was called the Jim Henson Company. It was called HA, or Henson Associates, and she is a brilliant, I am not exaggerating, a brilliant builder of puppets. And it's always a big treat to put on a puppet that was made by Raleigh, and she has so many fun and so many interesting stories to share with us, and I am excited for you to hear our conversation. So let's do it. Let's go below the frame with Rollie Krewson.
Below the frame.
Rollie Krewson, welcome to Below the Frame. How you doing?
I'm great, Matt. Thank you for having me on. It's been sort of a long time we've been trying to do this, but finally made it.
We finally lined up our schedules, and I'm so glad. I know you are incredibly busy with everything that you do, and so I'm grateful that you took the time today to talk to me about your really fascinating career. Do you mind talking to everybody about that?
No. It's fine. It's been a long time, so I hope I can remember everything.
Well, yeah, me too. Otherwise, it'll be a short interview. But that's okay. Well, you know what we'll do? We'll start back at the beginning, and I just want to know where you're from. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Bay Village, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland. And it's, basically a little tiny town with, it had parades and, it was a great place to grow up as a kid.
Yeah. And well, tell me about growing up there and your family.
I grew up with my mom and dad, and I had a brother who was 2 years younger than I was. And it was, it was a really fun childhood. My parents were very supportive. I liked puppets from early on, but I wasn't, because I watched Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop, and I saw a bunch of different puppets on TV. My cousins had puppets, but I wasn't into them right in the very beginning. I had my troll dolls. I liked doing all the doll, clothes making and house making and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, what age was this that you're doing
this was
clothes making?
Probably 8 years and up, I think, is probably when I started, because a lot of my construction was out of felt, so you didn't have to worry much about, hand stitching could be big.
And where did you learn how to hand stitch? Just taught yourself, or did somebody?
I believe my mom probably taught me. She was terrible at the sewing machine. She would never teach me. I learned sewing on a sewing machine when I was in probably 7th grade. And she tried to teach me, but she could never. She said it was like sweating blood to work on a sewing machine. So most of my sewing work was first hand stitching.
What were the other kind of things that you did as a kid growing up in Ohio?
We had lots of pets. I had cats. I never had a dog. I always still want a dog. Don't have a dog yet. We had ducks and chinchillas. And so we had lots of animals. We played outside all the time. We were always making forts and, doing that kind of stuff. It was much more outdoorsy than kids are now.
In doing all these things outside and sewing, and did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
No, I probably thought I was going to be a teacher because that's what girls kind of could do when they grew up at that point.
Yeah. And so what did you do when you graduated high school?
I went to Denison University, which is also a small college outside of Columbus in Ohio. And I had gone down to major in social work, I thought. And I had a roommate who was in theater. She was going to be a fine arts major. And she said, "Oh, why don't you come down? You know, they need help." So I went down with her, and I ended up ushering for her show. And there was something about it that just, I mean, I had done some stuff in high school. I had done a lot of theater, but I was mostly backstage work. And I thought, I really like this. I think I'm gonna major in theater.
So did you make the switch right then? And you were going to be an actor?
No. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea. I mean, I dabbled a little in acting. I was okay, but not that great. All my other friends that were actors were a lot better than I was. So I tended to be in the, either stitching the costumes or building props or doing sets.
Oh, so you were doing crew work, stuff like that. You enjoyed the theater part, but you wanted to be kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah. I was much better behind the scenes than I was in front of the scenes.
So when you graduated from college, what did you graduate with?
Well, I graduated with a bachelor's in theater. Oh. And I had done a specialty in children's theater at that point. So I actually took my first puppetry course was in college. The man who was our major set designer decided that he would teach puppets. I don't think he knew anything about puppets, but he got us a book and he kind of said, "It's up to you guys, go for it." So we made marionettes. I wrote and directed and did the set design for Sword in the Stone. I adapted the book to a play. We did puppets. We had no idea what we were doing. We looked at the books and we did I built a whole castle stage. And so the drawbridge came down and that was where the stage was. That was fun. And then we just went crazy. We thought, this is great.
What kind of puppets were you using with the drawbridge for?
Those were all marionettes. At that point, that's the only thing. Yeah, and they were a good 2 feet, 3 feet tall. Were
you standing behind them, or were you way
up
high?
We were up on a bridge, and we were, doing real marionette stuff. I mean,
self-taught, really. You were all self-taught.
All self-taught. We had no idea what we were doing. I think we figured out that we had to weight their feet. Otherwise, nothing was going to happen with them.
Yeah, it would have been a little tough to make anything happen. Around what year was this?
This was this would have been like 73.
So were you aware at any point of Sesame Street or of Jim Henson or of the Muppets at all?
Yes. I had watched, growing up, Ed Sullivan. I'd watched like Topo Gigio. I'd watched all of Jim's various things that he did on Ed Sullivan. I'd watched the Jimmy Dean shows. I know about Rolf.
Oh my gosh. You really knew about all of these things.
I knew about all of them, but they weren't, I knew about them, but it wasn't like out there yet. It wasn't out there until I was in my senior year in college. We did a intern program, and it was with the Great Lakes College Association. And basically what they did was they sent kids from the Midwest to New York to work with Broadway producers and just in the arts. And
that's really great.
Yeah, it was super. I don't know if they still have it, but I had friends who were working off Broadway and all, just as interns, which was fabulous.
It's just so amazing that they would send kids from the Midwest just to send them out to New York on their own.
And New York was really interesting in the 70s. It was kind of scary.
Where did you stay? Did they put you up, or how did that work?
I stayed on the Upper West Side it was 71st, just off of West End, in a hotel. It was like a residential hotel that was called the Coliseum House. It's still there. I don't know quite what it is now, but there were cockroaches in there that were the size of mice. And you'd find plaster from the ceiling that had fallen on your bed during the night. It was interesting, but it was great.
Well, yeah, despite all of those lovely additions to your residence, were you did you feel excited about being there in New York? And
yes, so excited. Absolutely. I mean, it was like one of the best times of my life. I must say and I didn't start out at Muppets.
I was going to say, where did you go? Where did you start out?
I first started, I interviewed with she turned out to be a newscaster. Her name is Judy Licht, and she worked for Fox at the time. No. She worked for, I think it was like Channel 12 or something. She worked on a show called Almanac, which was a public, broadcasting thing. It was a show that had 3 different themes for each half hour, and it would be like, baseball or this or that. So she was the host, and I would help her, just get her research ready and do stuff like that. And her husband at that point was Manny Eisenberg, who was a Broadway producer who knew Jim. They were working together on what Jim wanted to be his Broadway show.
Right.
Okay, so Judy had seen my puppets because I brought a couple of my marionettes with me. And halfway through working on that show, she was asked by Fox to come and be a newscaster. And she said, I really want to take you with me, but I can't.
Oh.
I can't because I'm going someplace else. But my husband, Manny, is working with Jim Henson, and you have these puppets, and do you want me to try and get you an interview? And I went, sure, because at that point, obviously, I knew about Sesame Street, and I thought, whoa, this is cool. I mean, sure.
Why not? I'm here.
Why not? I'm here. You can't take me with you. What else am I going to do?
What was I going to do? Yeah. Sit with the cockroaches and the plaster in my room?
Right.
No.
I didn't want to sit around in my hotel room every night. That would be awful.
No, yeah.
So I went and I interviewed with Diana Birkenfield and Bonnie Erickson, and I turned out to be their first intern.
You were the first intern.
I was the first intern.
And at this point, what was the company called? Was it Ha?
It was Ha. Yeah, it was Henson Associates.
Okay.
At that point, right.
And so you're the first intern. What were they going to have you do? Were they going to everything?
Everything.
Answer phones?
I answered phones. I shopped. I actually took care of money for a while, which was not the best thing for me to do.
That's same here.
Great. Yeah, please don't give me money. Please take this away from me. I mean, whatever. I dyed stuff for them. Bonnie would let me, if she did a rough, soft foam sculpture, she'd let me take it to the sander and carefully sand it. Of course, I lost a couple.
Well, you have to learn. You have to learn. That's a skill.
Yeah. There was one though that was like it was the Muppet newscaster, and it was like right before because you get into a Zen thing with the sander, and you zen it and it works really well. But if you get your attention taken away from it, it goes poof, right through the sander. And I managed to nick his upper lip. And at that point, it was too late to do anything. So the very first newscaster has a little nick. I mean, we sanded it away as best we could, but he has a tiny nick in his foam.
Well, let me ask you real quick, just so I understand. So someone snipped the head, right?
Yes, just Bonnie snipped the head.
Bonnie snipped the head out of a block of foam.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then you had to smooth the snips down because there's it's not perfect, and so you smooth it down with a sander. Yep. And then do they then flock it, or were they?
Yes, this one was flocked. Yep.
Okay.
You put the flock glue on it and then do the electrostatic process.
Okay. And so that's kind of what they used to do. They don't do that as much really anymore.
Well, not as much, but yeah, we still do it. I mean,
Okay.
it's a little more delicate than covering it with fleece or something. So so many of our puppets go to foreign countries now that it's really hard to keep it clean and
I would think.
nice. Yeah. So we tend to try and do more fleece covering.
It would last longer.
Yeah.
In general. Okay.
And
So
you can wash fleece, and you can't really wash flocking.
yeah, and it's also if you nick it with a sander, you might see that.
Yeah. I don't know how many people actually noticed it, but I sure did. I remember sitting on the stairs outside in the hallway, in tears, going, "Oh my God, they're gonna fire me."
But they didn't.
They didn't.
And so, but you're doing all these different things. You're doing everything that an intern would do. When did it kind of start to focus on puppet building?
I did my first puppets, during that internship with the help of Dave Goles, who was building the planet Coosbane.
Yeah, I've never heard of this guy, Dave Goles. Who
Never
is this?
heard of him. And he was nice enough to actually sort of take me under his wing, and I ended up making one of the Koozie pups. So that was basically my first puppet, was a Koozie pup.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
so that was
that. Was that for what was that created for? Was that for the Muppet Show or for?
It was for the Muppet Show, but it was for sex and violence.
I guess the pilot.
The pilot for it. Yeah.
Along this way, okay, so you met Dave, and Dave took you under his wing. That was very nice of him.
It was.
And he was also a performer at the time, or was he just?
He had
building?
he was starting off at that point. He was mostly in the shop. I mean, because he did the male Coosbane. And then the Koozie pups. I mean, he was basically building at that point. He was working as a performer on sex and violence, definitely. But I did too.
I was going to say, if you're building puppets and then you're also, maybe you're performing, you did some marionettes. Did you say, hey, I could puppet?
They actually, I was one of there's a thing called Birds and Trees. And I did one of the birds for that. So, I mean, I did dabble in it. I mean, I'm short. I'm very short. And it was all men at that point.
Tall men.
Tall men.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what I really liked doing was all the right-handing.
Oh, you liked assisting?
I liked assisting. I really had a good time with that.
What were some things that you did assisting early on? What did you assist?
Let's see. Early on, I did quite a bit of assisting on Saturday Night Live when we did the Gorch puppets and all that. I would help out with that. I helped Jim and Frank early on on Muppet Show. I did a lot. Actually, I did some Rolf on the piano because I could play the piano. So I helped Jim with that a lot.
That's a lot of fun. That's
until Stevie came along and was better than I was.
He's just incredible.
Yeah.
So along this way, I'm guessing you must have met Jim at some point.
Oh, I met Jim really early on.
Yeah.
I mean, because Jim would come to the workshop a lot. And he'd just hang out with us and chat. And sometime he did the original Swedish Chef. So he would, he'd sit there with a block of foam and start carving stuff out. And he would come and look at our stuff. And, it took a while. When I was first learning how to build puppets, I would only get to build bodies. I mean, that's basically how you work your way up to heads. You start with the bodies.
You start with the body.
Yeah. You start with the bodies. If you get the bodies, then they work you into the heads. And I think the first puppets I did were Stalks and Heaps, and they were also for sex and violence. Mm-hmm. So, I had like two really furry, feathery things, and then I had these weird phallic looking stalks that was like, and they would make fun of me all the time, everybody in the shop. Because here I am, I'm from the Midwest. I was really, really shy. And, they'd always make fun of me. So it was like I spent most of my early years blushing.
Welcome to the workshop.
Yes, welcome to the workshop.
Speaking of the workshop, if you were to picture yourself back there in the workshop, looking around you, who all was there at this very busy time of Muppets, and what did they do?
Let's see, I can do it by desks at this point. Bonnie was up in front, and she was basically, she and Carol Lee kind of were together as heads of the shop. Carol Lee was in charge of Sesame, and Bonnie was like more in charge of other projects at that point. And then John Lovelady sat directly in front of me, and he helped Carol Lee on Sesame Street, but he also did a lot of extra puppets as well. I mean, everybody kind of did everything at that point. Then my desk was there. Dave's desk was behind me. Don's desk was behind Dave, and then there was Carol Lee. And then Foz was upstairs. We had Mari Kasel was around as well. She was also designing and building puppets at that point. Who else was there? Kermit Love would be in occasionally. Christopher Lyle, his partner, would be in. So, I mean, that was the basic. And I got Larry Jameson his job. Larry and I went to college together. Oh. And Larry was planning on coming to New York and didn't know what he was going to do. And I basically said, oh, well, maybe Foz needs some help.
Yeah.
So they hired him.
Wow. What was the atmosphere around the workshop like in those early days? You did say, they gave you some, they teased you.
Yeah, they teased me a lot. Everybody, I mean, it was, Don Sleen was fabulous. I mean, Don was always setting up little tricks and jokes, and I'd come in, I'm an early bird. I've always been an early bird. I'm still an early bird. I would come in first thing Monday morning, and Don would have been in over the weekend, and he would have rigged something to the elevator door. The elevator door was like a double thing, so you had to unlock the inside part, and then you could open the outside part. And he would always rig a dress dummy with a monster on it so that when you pull back the door, the monster would swing around and go, or you'd trip a wire and a little piece of fluff would go zinging off down into the, I mean, I'd always sort of brace myself Monday morning to find out. And I'd miss it if he didn't do it. It's like, maybe he wasn't here this weekend. It was a lot of fun. I mean, people did that all the time. We had mice in an aquarium, and Don had rigged, slinkies that they could walk up, and they'd walk up the slinkies and across the ceiling and down into another tank. It was great. We always had a good time. I mean, that is what I like about the workshop the most, which extends even till now, is that people like to play jokes on each other. It's always, I mean, unless we're really, really, really busy.
Which does happen.
Which does happen.
That's sure,
I mean, everybody, we all get along really well, and we just have a good time. We enjoy each other.
That's kind of that's an important thing. And I think, that also goes into the puppet world, the puppeteer world too.
Right,
it's always better when everybody enjoys each other's company. It makes it much more pleasant.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the play aspect, everybody likes it. It's fun to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we get our work done, but we love to play.
That's right. Yeah. We'll be back with Raleigh Crewson in a few minutes, but first, This is usually where Jack knocks on the door and he gives me a hard time, but I guess he's not.
Hey.
Oh, gosh, Jack, you scared me. Well, when did you get here?
I've been here the whole time.
Really?
No. I know you don't believe that, and neither do they, Dad. We all know how editing works.
Okay, Jack.
Injury corner time.
Oh, so you can just come in and...
Say what bit's next? Yep.
Oh, well...
Commence injury corner.
Just give me a minute. Just give me a second. Sorry, I'm just okay. Oh, I have to stand up.
Joining me today on the injury corner is Bruce Lanoyle.
Ouch, ouch, ouch.
Bruce.
Yes.
Now, I have a question for you.
Oh, no.
Have you ever had an injury while you were puppeteering? I can guess that you have, because that's why you're at the injury corner. So
Yeah,
please,
it kind of works out that way,
I
yeah.
hand it over to you.
I was trying to do a really long scene with the Cat in the Hat puppet, and I was perpendicular. I mean, it constricted my lungs and my chest, and somehow my lung just depressed, and all of a sudden I couldn't get my breath, and I had to go be rushed to a chiropractor because all of a sudden everything just stopped. I've had back, of course we all have, because we're always tilted. It's like tennis players. You have one giant arm and you have this withered up, helper arm. But when that happened to me, I got adjusted because one of my vertebrae was pushing against a rib that was actually pushing into my lung, and nothing got punctured. But, working so hard to make it work, I just lost my breath. I literally lost my breath. So it was repaired, and I did get back to work the following day.
Wow.
Not fun, but, taking one for the team, that's part of it.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable as a puppeteer, you're not puppeteering correctly, is kind of the motto, right?
That might be the lesson.
It's
here.
a bad motto for anybody, but it's
really
kind of true.
Now, back to the show. We're picking it up with Raleigh Crewson. You did so many shows, so many projects during your time at Jim's company. Muppet Valentine's Show, Muppet Show Sex and Violence, which we talked about. The Muppet Show, it says you were a Muppet designer and workshop supervisor. Were you over in London, or were you in New York doing that?
No, I was in London. I went to London for 6 weeks and ended up staying about 6 years. I mean, I was occasionally back in New York, but I would guess the last 4 years I didn't come back at all.
Wow.
Yeah,
Even during the off time.
Yeah, even during the off time. Well, I had a boyfriend over there. I mean, because I'd basically moved my life over there. Yeah. So I had a boyfriend over there, and I felt like my life was more there than here. And there was always the time off in between was not that long. I also at one point did I went and took a course at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in stage management.
Oh, why did you do that? Why did you want to do that?
I didn't want it. It was, there have been a couple of times when Muppets has been, not as fulfilling as I wanted it to be, or I wanted something else. And it was one of the off times. And I thought, I don't know, maybe I should do something else. So I went and learned stage management. I built a lot of props for them. They actually asked me to stay and become their prop master. But at that point, I went, no, I really like building puppets better.
Yeah.
So I went back to Muppets.
It's interesting that you were kind of going back to your college days of doing stuff backstage and, building props and getting back into theatrical stuff. But the Muppets were too strong a call for you. You just couldn't stay away. Couldn't
stay away. And Jim and Dave Laser at that point were Jim was always good about if people needed to go away for a little while, he was fine with that. Mm-hmm. He was like, well, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And
go to the Royal Academy. Sure.
Sure.
Come back.
Yeah.
But I figure it helped me with my, just knowing London, because if, working in props and being a stage manager, you had to make a lot of calls. You had to know where everything was. So it actually helped me when I came back.
What was this between what seasons? Do you remember?
I think it was between the third and fourth season, I think, because I was there all of the fourth and fifth season.
So what was it like to work on the Muppet Show? What was the pace like building puppets on a show like that? How much time would you have to build new puppets for new shows?
not much. No, I love that. I mean, it was, we would go in Sunday and everybody was invited to the read through, which I really liked. Because we got to meet the guest star and everybody got to kind of hear what the script was like. And then we'd find out, a lot of times we would find out if they needed a special puppet, we'd find out before then, because Jim knew that it would take a while to build it. But a lot of times we heard about it for the first time on Sunday. And they would start taping on, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Is that right? Tuesday, Wednesday, no, Wednesday. Yeah, this is a long time ago.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, I know. It's, I know that they did like a pre-record day and then they did a guest star day.
Yeah,
and did a bunch
guest star day. And then, So yeah, we didn't have a whole lot of time. It was like whatnots. So we were making up puppets all the time. I got to make Foo-Foo, Miss Piggy's little dog. And that was based after our prop lady had a little dog whose name, I can't remember what the dog's name really was, but that was a stand-in for Foo-Foo.
Was that the real in the show?
That was the real, yes.
That's like a trained dog. That dog seems very trained.
Yeah. Yeah, she had worked really hard on training it. And then I had to kind of match it Muppet style.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I just was watching an episode of the Muppet Show the other day, actually, where there's Foo-Foo and it's the real dog and she jumps down and there's Foo-Foo, the puppet, that comes up and grabs something from Miss Piggy. So what is the most unique puppet that you ever built for the Muppet Show?
Wow.
Or the hardest one, either that or like the one that it was so difficult.
I think that, wow, there were so many. I don't know that they were hard or anything, but I liked always doing the animals. And I got to do sheep and seals. And I mean, those were my favorite ones to do, were all the animal puppets.
Is that because they were more realistic?
Maybe. For Debbie Harry, we made these really strange, it turned out to be like AM puppets. They were, we could take the features off, but they were her backup group. Yeah. And they were really odd. And then Kenny Rogers, we had the guys that were with him on the train and stuff.
Yeah, they're like very weird, human-y kind of things.
Guys, they were interesting, and those were flocked. Those were
really?
snipped and flocked. And again, we didn't have much time for those, and that was interesting.
Yeah, I'll bet. Any big mishaps that happened on the Muppet Show with a puppet that you can remember that may have happened?
Oh, I'm sure there were. I have to tell you,
it always happens.
Yeah, I mean, I have to tell you, this isn't really a mishap, but this is a Frank Oz Miss Piggy story. We built puppets, but we also wrangled, and our workshop was right off the stage, the studio that we used all the time. So a lot of times you'd be out there with them, and Frank would be, Miss Piggy's neck, it's just not straight. Can you take this in and repin it? And you kind of you learned when Frank was having a hard day. And so you'd say, okay, I'll be right back. So you'd go back into the workshop, take a sip of coffee, look at the pig, go, his head's fine.
Yeah.
Take it back out to me, put her back on and go, oh, it's much better. Thank you. And it's like, we didn't do anything. It's but we knew, but because we worked with them all the time, you could tell when they were having, Frank's, I had a rough night. Okay.
Yeah. It's almost like he needed just a mental reset. And you take this away, bring it back. And he's
away
like,
and bring it back. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Were there any guest stars there that you were just gaga over?
What was his name? He was, not that I was gaga over, but he tried to take me out.
Oh. Really?
It was Ben Vereen.
Oh, Ben Vereen.
Ben Vereen,
Wow.
yes. Ben Vereen tried to take me out, and David Laser had to. He said, I guess he went up to him and said, that's not cool. Because, I mean, I was like 21 or something. I don't know how old Ben Vereen was, but, it was like, maybe not.
Operator Ben Vereen.
Yeah, right. A lot of times Jim would take us all out to dinner with whoever was the guest star. And at one point we all got to go out with the Star Wars crew. So that was fun.
I'll bet, yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun. We played I know I've told this story a couple of times. We played Spin the Bottle. I don't know. I guess we'd had a little too much to drink at that point. But yeah,
While you were out at dinner, you played Spin the Bottle?
Uh-huh. We may have been gone at that point. I'm not sure, but there were a whole bunch of us sitting at a big round table, and we played Spin the Bottle, and I got to kiss a Wookiee.
Well.
Yeah, well.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great memory. That's really cool. During some of that time with the Muppet Show, there were some movies that were made as well.
Yeah.
The Muppet movie was made.
That was the break. That could have been the break in between the first and second season.
Between first and second.
Because I didn't work on it, because I think that was one of the times I stayed over there.
You stayed in London. So
Yeah.
they did the Muppet movie back in America.
Right.
And you stayed.
And I
London.
stayed. So I didn't really work on that, because that was all out in California.
But then the Great Muppet Caper happened.
Right.
That was in London.
It was in London. So I did do some work on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we were still doing, we were probably getting ready for another Muppet Show season at that point too. I mean, it was all very, back and forth and back and forth.
How many people would be? I mean, was there a second team that came in to work on the films, or would you you would jump over here while this main team was working on the movie? You might come over and do something.
That's what. Yeah, I mean, it was basically a whole second team, and then they would call us in if they needed us.
Mm-hmm. And then you worked on
Muppets Take Manhattan.
Muppets Take Manhattan.
That one was fun.
And that was back here.
That was back here. Yeah, and Jane Gutnick and I were head of the workshop out at the studio.
Mm-hmm.
So we were sort of, in charge of all the puppets. And and Barbara Davis was there for Piggy.
Right. Gotta have
Piggy,
one person.
Piggy all the time. So it was basically the three of us who did most of that. We call people in for the big scenes, but a lot of times we were also performing for that too. I did a lot of right-handing on that as well, and some background guys.
Where did you shoot that when you were in studio? Where was that?
I can't even remember where we were.
Was it in Manhattan or was it in Brooklyn?
No, it was in
Queens.
It was in Queens. Is that right? Or Brooklyn? I don't know.
Is it still a studio that's out there, or is it gone?
I'm not sure. I honestly don't know. I mean, at that time, it was so intense and the hours were so long. I came home one night and Art, my husband, took us out for dinner, and I fell asleep at the table before the meal came.
You were probably working such long hours.
It was really long hours. It was so long. And there basically was three of us, and we just call people in occasionally.
So you've built a ton of puppets in your time on many, 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 many projects, a lot of Muppet projects since the 70s. Like I said, Muppets Take Manhattan, Labyrinth, Christmas Toy, Jim Henson Hour, Dog City, Muppet Christmas Carol, Animal Show, Dr. Seuss, Muppets from Space, and many, many, many more. What's one of the secrets to building a great puppet?
I don't know. I feel like a lot of me goes into a puppet. I try, if I know who the performer is going to be, I try and at least fit them, or at least try and figure out, how they're going to use the puppet. If not, if I don't know that, I mean, I try and make it really comfortable for them. That's a big thing in my mind. That was always, a although Jim never really cared. He worked some of the most uncomfortable puppets that were ever built. But I mean, he did want his performers to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is. It's sort of an innate kind of thing. I could never pinpoint it exactly. There's a lot of me in those puppets.
Well, let me ask you this. You were aware that, Jim really didn't care, but he wanted the puppets to be comfortable for everybody else.
Right.
As you got to know the performers, did you get to know what they liked in a puppet? Like, oh, I know that Jerry likes to have a certain, something inside the head of the puppet, or I know what Richard liked, or I know what Frank likes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There was definitely some of that going on.
What can you remember any of those kinds of things for any of those guys? Like Jerry, what would he tend to gravitate to in all of his puppets or in most of his puppets?
I mean, he just wanted a flexible mouth, as much of as much movement. I mean, that's when we were first building puppets, it was more about closeness to the hand, manipulability. I can't even say the word.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that word is.
Yeah, whatever that word is.
Just so that it would work really well, that your hand could do. I mean, the problem that I see now is with a lot of my Sesame Street puppets is the heads are just getting gigantic because everybody wants them. I mean, they're going from how tall they're going to be. And it's like, no, you can't go that way. You got to make it close to the hand, you got to have there's got to be some play in there.
And that means kind of head size and the ability for the puppeteer to be able to manipulate the puppet.
Yeah, manipulate the puppet.
If it's too big, it could, that could add weight, weight that leans forward when you don't, it's not great. Yeah. That would not be great. What you're creating is a piece of art that we are then taking and bringing to life somehow. So I think that you putting a lot into the puppets that you create is one of the secrets for sure. And it is unquantifiable. You can't put your finger on it.
It's really hard. It's just, I don't know. I really like it. And my favorite part about building a puppet is doing the first mock-up. Because a lot of times the essence of that puppet is immediately there. And I can't explain that. I mean, and sometimes you lose that when you make the real puppet. I try not to, but sometimes it's just whatever comes out right away.
So when you're building a puppet and you've gotten a design from someone and they say, here, build this puppet, what are your first steps?
Basically, the first steps are to try and figure out what kind of foam, what materials we're going to use.
Like a soft foam, a more dense foam?
More dense foam, a combination of the two. Are we going to, is the head going to be carved out of a solid block of foam? It's kind of, how big is it? A lot of times we'll take a sketch and we'll blow it up to the size that, they want it to be. So it'll be, and then you'll look at it and you'll go, well, okay, the head looks way too big. So let's shrink the head down a little,
Yeah.
So you'll kind of figure that out first, and you'll do that all on paper. And then we usually use like upholstery foam because the other foams are expensive. So upholstery foam, it gives you the general shape of it. So you'll start. Sometimes I'll take it from another body that's already built. I'll go, well, that kind of looks like it's the size of, whoever. It's Julia's body. It's so-and-so's body. So I'll take that and I'll start hacking it. I'll make it up quick, and then I'll take pieces away or add pieces to it until I until I get a shape that I like.
If you're using, some flimsy foam or whatever you're using, how are you putting it together? Are you gluing it together? Or
Sometimes I pin it. Sometimes I'll pin it together. A lot of times I'll glue it together just because you'll get a better line, and whoever's going to look at the mock-up can see that better. A lot of times you'll get, when they start to look at the mock-ups, they'll get into, if you put features on them, which I tend to not like to do because they'll get all absorbed in the features. And it's like, no, that's the last thing that goes on.
Yeah.
Look at the shape of the puppet first.
Yeah. And is this mock-up workable? Can you put your hand in it and see how it works? And
Yep, definitely.
And at that point, are you thinking, oh, what I'm going to need in here? It's going to need a brain, or it's going to need a palette of some sort. Are you thinking all those things through?
I am. Yep, definitely. I mean, a lot of times you'll need to put like a head stuffer in there. I'll try and figure out, where I want to put the grip in the upper mouth. Do I want a thumb grip in the lower? Is the lower jaw close enough that you don't need one?
At this point in that phase, is the performer, if they've been cast, is the performer ever involved? Do you bring them in, or is this a little bit later?
That's a little later. Usually the mock-up, we just, go straight for shape and not so much for function quite. The head usually is a little more refined. I'll try and get the smile curve in there. Yeah. And a lot of times, though, if I'm showing producers or stuff the mock-up, I won't have put any fleece on. And they're always saying, I don't know, I miss the smile curve. Where's the smile curve? I'm going, in the fleece, guys.
It'll be there. It'll be there.
Don't worry about it. It will smile. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So, the performers, if we know who they are, usually come around when we've been given the okay to go ahead and start building the puppet.
All right. So you have that mock-up. It needs no changes. What's your next step then?
The next step is to go ahead and start using the real materials. So that would be, Scott foam if we want to do that. Usually the bodies are out of Scott foam or L200 or something. So then we'll go ahead and start doing that, pattern the fleece, get the head started. Once we get to the point where want to put grips in, then if we know the performer, that's when they'll come in. A lot of times I'll have, if I know it's for, one of you guys, I have a little tiny hand, so I'll get somebody to put, some man to put their hand in the puppet and say, how does this feel?
Then a performer comes in, they try it on, they're like, oh, I would love to have a thumb cup in here, or I just need a little bar in the top. And then that's put in, they go away.
Right.
Then, so you've got this kind of foam, is it just a foam skeleton, I guess, that you've got of the puppet, and then you start to add the fleece to the top of it and start to finish it out that way?
Yeah. Once we do that, that's when we're, trying to figure out jointing in the arms. Julia's an interesting case because she has the arm, because she's autistic, she's got the kind of, and Michelle Hickey actually figured out how to do that on set.
So just for those of you that are following along here, Julia, she kind of flaps her arms and her wrists kind of flap on their own. And if I remember correctly, the rods go in through the elbow. Right. Through both elbows. So it gives her that ability to make it look like she's flapping her arms. And what allows it to do that you said Michelle kind of came up with?
I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to find that out because I have to
fair enough.
take it apart.
Fair enough. All right, then instead of that question, I'll ask this. As you are stitching the fleece together, there's something called the Muppet Stitch. So we should talk about the Muppet Stitch, because is that used on every puppet?
It is, but you know what? Everybody thinks it's something different.
Oh, really?
There's some people that think it's the baseball stitch, and some people think it's the ladder stitch, and some people think it's a whip stitch. It's like, okay.
You're here to set the record straight.
Okay. I was taught way back in the 70s that it's a very small, tight, consistent whip stitch. That's the original Muppet Stitch.
Very small, consistent whip stitch.
Yep. What I've added is that I knot it off every 10 stitches or so, just so that if it's going to come apart, it comes apart in a small place.
Yeah, and it doesn't keep unraveling.
Yeah, it doesn't keep
that's
going.
Very smart, Raleigh. That is. That's really good. That's great. That's a great idea.
So, but I use the ladder stitch to close up. There's always something that you can't get to from the inside. So if I have to close something up, I use what they call a ladder stitch. And that basically, what happens for me anyway, I've tried using the baseball stitch, and the baseball stitch for me forces the edges outward of the fleece, which I don't like. And I know people use it, and it's fine. If you can do it and you're good at it, by all means use it. But
Use it.
I like the whip stitch because you can take and steam that seam absolutely flat. I mean, I know Anne Holgroon, who builds a lot of Kermits, she uses that stitch too, and you can't see the seams.
You were talking about doing a ladder stitch.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same thing? So let's say we have to, for one reason or another, we have to sometimes you have to open the back of the puppet's head so you can get in through the back of the head, or maybe there's a repair that needs to be made. I don't know. But then you need to close that head back up. If it's fur, are you doing it a different process than you are with the fleece?
No, it's the same process. Again, if you're closing that last little piece off, I would use the ladder stitch because it's forcing those edges back in again, which is what you want. Fur, I use the whip stitch on the fur too.
Yeah. And
closes it. Fur, you have less. I mean, a lot of people, figured out how to stitch it on a machine. I still do it all by hand. I'm just old school. I mean, what can I say?
All the way back to when you were an 8-year-old, you're just stitching away. We were talking about all these credits that you've had, and we've talked a little bit about it, but we haven't mentioned Sesame Street, really.
Right.
When did you start working on Sesame Street kind of consistently?
Okay. I mean, when I was an intern, I helped Carol Lee a lot on Sesame Street. So that was my very first introduction to, Muppets at that point. And then I went away, worked on the Muppet Show, and did all the other stuff, and didn't really do a whole lot on Sesame Street until 1986 or 87. And Carol Lee at that point gave me Elmo to do.
Now, it was already
he was called the Little Red Monster at that point, and he had just started being Elmo.
Okay. What did she want you to do? To recreate him?
She wanted me to build him after that. So I've built him ever since 1987.
Do you know how many you've built over the years?
God, so many.
A dozen?
More? Probably more than a dozen. Well, because every foreign country has their Elmo.
And you're building all of those?
I'm building all of the Elmos. Yep.
Has anybody else built an Elmo?
No, not since
Just
1987. Just me.
Wow.
Just me. And I'm the only one building Abby.
You built the first Abby, right?
I built the very first Abby.
She was created when she was sketched out and designed and everything. What was that process like?
The very first, Jason Weber and I were called into a writers' meeting. And basically the writers had said, this is what we want. We want her skin to be slightly different. We don't want to use fleece, but we don't want to use fur. We want something in between. She's unique. She's a fairy, and they, talk costume a little and all of that. And they gave us a general idea of what, how big they wanted her and what they wanted her head shape to be like. And I can draw, but I haven't spent my entire life doing it. So I tend to go for 3-dimensional. So they sent us back to the workshop, and I made 2 or 3 different heads, which I still have in a box somewhere back in the workshop. And one of those looks very much like the Abby that we have now. However, somewhere in there, Ed Christie was also invited to do some sketches. Now, there's a bit of contention as to who did Abby. He did the sketch of her, and I don't know, my head came first, looks like his. The only thing that's different are the eyes. And he did, the shape of her eyes that they are now.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So it's
There's-
almost like a little
There's a
mishmash
little,
yeah.
going on about that. It's fine.
Does that happen though with characters sometimes, that there would be some collaboration and somebody might say, oh, make her eyes wider, or let's give this character eyebrows, and then that was not on the original sketch, but it just kind of happens. Or you as a puppet builder might say, I'm going to add some freckles or something.
Yeah,
That might happen, right?
I mean, he did. Oh, yeah. I mean, he definitely did the sketch that we used.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's like so much. I would love there to be a term of a 3-dimensional design,
Yeah.
because there's a sketch. There's a whole world between a sketch and the puppet. And then there's the whole world between the puppet and when the puppet is performed.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like the puppet builders get left out a lot. And you hear about, oh, it's the sketch, the designer, the da-da-da. But there's no, it's hard. It's hard.
I would think it's really hard to translate from a flat 2-dimensional drawing. Did you do Tango?
Yes.
Okay, so that
Yeah.
I mean, that is a character that started out as a 2-dimensional character and was built from a 2-dimensional character. And I remember, just because I was kind of following along in the process of this,
Right.
that's not easy to do to get what people's minds are into this 3-dimensional. Not only just making it 3-dimensional, but making it 3-dimensional and making it look like a Muppet, like a puppet that fits in the world of the Muppets. I think that's really hard.
And I still am not happy with him. I mean,
really?
he still to me looks, well, I mean, he was an animated thing, and he was always going to be an animated thing. And then they decided they wanted a puppet of him. And things just don't work the same, It's fine that they're there in an animated picture, but he's got a big head and a little tiny body.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes they don't listen, It's like, but it's got to be performed. All you've got is his head in screen. You can't.
That's true.
Leslie,
yes,
who
sometimes
does
you just see,
Tango, There's nothing she can do with that body.
No.
And
I mean, it is difficult.
It's hard.
And, doing it the other way, because if you think of, we've got Elmo, and then you're going to animate him, he does change. He changes going from a 3-dimensional character into a 2-dimensional character.
I tried to tell them.
Yeah.
I tried to say to them, look, your animated Elmo does not look like my Elmo.
Right.
But kids know who he is.
Right.
It's like, what's the difference if your dog actually works for the performer, the body's a little longer, the head's a little smaller, but doesn't it matter? I mean, the kids know.
Yeah, I agree. And it does. Then it is left after you've created this piece of art.
I feel so badly about Tango because I want Leslie to be able to work this dog, and she does a really good job.
She does a great job. Yeah.
But it could be easier.
Right.
She could do more if the body were a little longer, the head was a little smaller.
And
she doesn't have big. I mean, the ears. The ears are great. I love the ears.
They work
But
perfectly.
she's got huge cables and all this stuff dragging her down. It's like, can we have a second dog that doesn't have ear mechs?
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, because Tango's ears, they are, there's a lot of things coming out of the bottom of that puppet that make him activate. And I think it's a learning process too, because Julia really was maybe one of the first that went from a 2-dimensional into 3-dimensional, and that seems to be pretty successful. I mean, that character looks like what she did in 2 dimensions, but somehow isn't exact, but looks very nice in 3D. And maybe she's got a longer body. She does have a bigger head, I guess, but
it's a really big head.
but it seems to work a little better.
Yeah, there's one picture that keeps being put up on social media with this cute little blonde kid and Julia, and the little blonde kid's head is like this big, and Julia's head is this big, and I keep going, Oh my God. Jeez.
Ay. Well, you've also built Zoe. You built Zoe
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, built Zoe.
and Julia, like we said. You
Julia.
built
Yeah, my
her,
daughter actually helped me with Zoe's hair. When we were first making it, Ariana was like 4 and she was into sparkly things. So that's when we added the Mylar sparkles to Zoe's hair, was because of Ariana.
And how do you do that? How do you, what is that material?
You make little feather plugs, and you basically, you take this many pink feathers and this many orange feathers and this many little Mylar pieces. And then you put a little hot glue on the end, and you can spend 2 days making plugs for Zoe's hair.
Wow. Yeah. Kind of like putting feathers on Big Bird.
Oh, God.
Takes forever.
Oh, that's even longer. That's a much longer process.
Did you ever have to do anything like that? Did you ever have to put feathers on a Big Bird?
No, you know what? I've managed to pretty much not have to deal with Big Bird.
Fine, whatever.
I'm sorry, Matt.
That's okay. We are going to pause my interview with Raleigh Crewson for a minute so that we can ask a puppeteer about not puppets.
Ask the puppeteer about not puppets.
Today, we've got a question for Louise Gold about not puppets. Louise,
Yes.
have you ever been arrested?
I don't think I have, but obviously you can tell it. I had to think for a minute.
Oh, all right.
It's, like there's always that feeling of guilt. I don't know those questions when people ask you think, I don't think I have, but maybe I have.
Maybe I
was in
have.
prison for 10
Does
years.
he know something I don't know?
Yes.
No, I don't know anything.
No, I don't think I have. I've never been
right.
arrested.
Louise, did you have a nickname when you were growing up?
Richard's family, I don't think Richard, but they call me Weezer. Lula Bell, Luby Lou.
Who called you Lula Bell?
Who calls me Lula Bell? I don't know. Somebody.
Yeah, okay.
People. Somebody once did. Somebody called me something once. Goldie.
I like Goldie. Oh, I like that one.
Goldie.
That's fun.
Yeah. Nothing very
That's a lot of
exciting, though.
No, those are all great. Those are all perfect nicknames.
Ask the puppeteer about not puppets.
We're back with Raleigh Crewson. Is there a Sesame or Muppet character that you feel like you identify best with?
Wembley.
Wembley, whom you also built.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know. It's something sort of innate about Wembley. I always thought he was really successful, just the way his head moved, his mouth moved, just who he, how Stevie made him be. I just really, from the very first time I, did the mock-up, I knew that he would be a cool puppet.
And that shape of his nose and, just kind of, or whatever that is. I guess it's his nose. The front of his face. I don't know.
There's a ping pong ball in the front of his nose.
Is there?
With a hole, so you can just stick your finger in there and you could actually move it if you want to.
That's pretty great. Did you build the Wembley puppet for the Fraggle series that's coming to Apple TV Plus?
I did. I did.
So
I did Wembley again.
all of these years later, you got to rebuild Wembley.
Yeah, it was really interesting doing the whole thing. I also built Red for the first one, but I chose not to do Red this time. I did Wembley, and I was kind of in charge of, the first time around, I was in charge of all the background puppets. So this time, I was also in charge of all the background puppets.
Ah.
Yeah. So
how many puppets were created for the new series?
For the new one, 30, 40 puppets probably.
Wow.
A lot. I mean, they were all the background puppets were brand new, but we used the old patterns.
And were any of those, that's cool. That's really cool, actually.
Yeah.
That they were based on the old
Yeah,
patterns.
they were we used the original patterns.
Wow. Are those Fraggles, are they like Whatnots, or are they
A lot less like Whatnots because they don't have noses. I mean, their noses are built in, so you can't put a nose on top. They don't have ears.
Right.
I mean, all you can do is you can change their hair and you can put lids on them. We did do a lot of, switching back and forth on that kind of stuff, but they're not as, the variety isn't there as much as it is with Whatnots and AMs.
What an exciting thing for Fraggle Rock to come back.
Yeah, it really is. I'm really excited to finally see it.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I want to talk now. Did you ever spend any time with the Muppet Performers over the years? Maybe outside of work or maybe inside work. That's fine too. Or do you have any specific memories of them? If I said a name of a puppeteer, tell me what your impression or maybe something about them that you felt, because you must have come in contact with them over the years. I'll start with Carol Spinney.
Oh, Carol Spinney. I mean, his stories. Anytime you see Carol, he was full of stories. Yeah. And from the time I met him, he was full of stories. And I realized that he and Debbie must have met just about the same time I was coming to Muppets.
Yeah.
So, and that wasn't, she wasn't on set as much then, obviously, as she was later.
Right.
But yeah, it was. He was great. He was a lot of fun to be around all the time.
Yeah. How about Richard?
Oh, Richard took me on my first motorcycle ride. I had never been on a motorcycle before. I mean, Richard was. He said, "Oh, sure, come on, put this helmet on," and we rode around for a while. I don't even remember where we were, but it was like, amazing. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Richard. Richard was, generous to a fault. Was always taking people out to dinner, even way back Muppet days. Yeah. Muppet Show days. He was always the one that, kept the spirits light, and he was wonderful.
Frank
always scared me. He always scared me. He was always so serious.
He's intense.
He's so intense.
Maybe back in the old days he was intense. I mean, he seems to have lightened up a little bit.
Yeah, he has. I think honestly, having kids lightened him up a lot, and then he became a little more human and not quite so like. I was still a lot younger than he was when I started. So, he and Jim we were like, woo. Oh, yeek.
Yeah. Let's talk about Jim then.
Jim was like my dad in New York. He was always, he let me, I moved from Brooklyn Heights into Manhattan, and he let me borrow his Jaguar.
What?
To move my stuff in. And I'm going, are you sure? Like, okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I was so afraid something was going to happen, between Brooklyn and New York. I think now I'm a lot less brave. I probably would said thank you very much now. But back then it was like, okay, thanks.
Wow. Yeah.
So he would, take us out to lunch, and I spent time with Don Celine and Jim, and, they'd be, at lunch, making sketches on napkins and talking about stuff. That was great. That was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bet. That must have been so neat.
That was fabulous. I have to tell you about my I have one really funny Jim story, which you would appreciate.
Yeah.
It was during Muppets Take Manhattan, and we were doing the locker scene, and there was some lighting or something was going on. So everybody was kind of standing around. Jim was on his Rollie cart on the floor with Kermit, and everybody was sort of standing around waiting for lighting or whatever it was. And I'm standing there I'm, head wrangler for that. And I'm standing there kind of, watching. And Jim calls me over and he says, my arm rod just fell out of Kermit. I went, oh God, that's the last thing you want is for an arm rod to fall out of
Right.
Jim's frog. Oh my
Yeah.
God, right? Yeah. So, okay, I said, okay. And I put it back in, pin it in, do everything, hand it back, walk away. And I'm sort of like watching him now. And I'm watching him and he's twisting the arm. He's got the frog and he just is twisting and twisting. And he looks, it's just about to fall out again. And he happens to look up at me and he sees me looking at him. And he just bursts out laughing and goes bright red. And I just sort of go.
He was playing.
He was playing. He was bored. He was playing.
That's really funny.
It was really funny.
Oh my gosh. What was it like when you found out that he had died?
Oh God, it was awful.
Yeah.
I can't even. It was a morning. I had just seen him on it was Thursday or Friday before that, and he'd had a bad cold, and he was on his way to see relatives. I think it was in North Carolina, but he was getting on a plane and going down there, and I think it was Monday into a Tuesday that he passed away. And we came into the shop and, I was like the first one there, and somebody from the main office came over and it had been raining. So his face was wet and we thought it was because it was raining. And then he told us that Jim had passed away, and everybody was just like, nobody knew what to do. We were all in shock. I think at one point they called us over to the main office, which was on 69th Street at that point. And Fox 5 was right outside the shop. So, of course, there were reporters there who were kind of like in our faces when we left. It was like, what are we supposed to say to you? I mean, it's like, it was an awful time. It was just awful because none of us knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. Did you think that that was it? Like the company was going to just...
It could have been. Yeah, we weren't sure. We just didn't know. I mean, I think, his death, because it was so sudden, I think that's the worst I've ever felt about anyone who's passed away.
So sudden. Just so sudden.
So sudden. It was so sudden. And people were, most people were really nice, but when we had the funeral for the memorial service for him, somebody came up to me and asked me if I could get their son a job. I'm going, oh, my boss just died. My friend just died. Why are you doing this? And it was like, it was very strange.
Yeah, I can only imagine. What an odd, unbelievable, it feels surreal, I'm sure.
It was totally surreal.
Unexpected. And well, thankfully the company did continue on and the Muppets live on.
Yes.
And you are part of that. You are part of continuing that legacy for Jim. So
that's how I look at it every day. If I happen to be having a bad day, it'll be like, no, I'm here because Jim still wants me to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Raleigh, you do some other puppet building as well. You build some puppets for David Rudman's company, Spiffy.
I do build puppets for Spiffy. I like Spiffy. I've been building puppets with David since Curious Buddies.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh, way, way long ago. I built Curious Buddies, did Jack's Big Music Show, Bunny Town, worked on Don Quixote now, which has been a lot of fun. I like working with David. David is really close to Jim in demeanor and working with people and wanting to get the best out of people. And he gets the best, but he also brings the best out of people. And he's really good about new talent.
Yeah. He's fantastic. I love working with Spiffy. I've said that on this podcast more than once, that it's such a joy to work with David Rudman.
It is.
And he's a great guy. Yeah.
Well, he's a great collaborator. I mean, he's always when I was doing like Jack's Big Music Show, we didn't have Zoom calls. We didn't have phones. He would just send me a quick little, sketch like Jim used to do, like little here. Build this, right? And David did this, and now David's got people who put it on the computer and do all that, so it's a little different. But David used to do all the sketches, and they used to be like 5 lines, and he'd say, build this, and I'd build it, and I'd send it to him, and he had to basically work with whatever I sent him. So I had a hope that I was doing what he wanted.
Yeah, they're great puppets. I love working Spiffy puppets, whether they're the little tiny bunnies or the donkey, or like King Friday on Don Quixote. Such great things. How long do you think that you can build puppets, Raleigh? How long do you want to build puppets?
I would love to build puppets for a lot longer. It's the commute. It's the commute.
It's a stinking commute. That's for me too. I can't stand the commute.
No.
I could just magic myself there.
Cut out the commute. They'd never get rid of me.
I know. Yeah, that is the hard part, is the commute. Do you drive in?
I was during the pandemic when we had to go in every, once a week or something.
Mm-hmm.
I was driving in, but I'd be fine driving in the morning, but trying to get home at night, especially like, fall, winter, when it starts getting dark, I'd be tired and I would I wouldn't want it.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, so I take the train. I mean, the train's fine, but it's like 3 hours out of the day.
Yeah, it takes up a chunk of time.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you've built these amazing pieces of art that people get to see, myself, I'm privileged to be able to put on my hand and bring to life. And we are all grateful for you. And the people that get to see your work on television and in the movies, man, what a treat they get. Because
I love the fact that I get to build puppets for, so many different countries. And hopefully they're helping.
Yeah, your work is all over the world.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's almost
whoever thought. I never thought.
I know, who knew?
Whoever thought?
Yeah, it's so wild. Okay, Raleigh, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. Now, usually these are kind of framed for puppeteers, but I have crafted some specifically for you. So here we go. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. What is the hardest part about being a Muppet builder?
Doing a character over and over, the same character many, 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 many times.
And making it consistent, making it stay the same? Is that what it is?
The one before, yes.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet.
That's really hard.
Yeah. What's the easiest part about being a Muppet builder?
Having fun with my friends.
I love that. What is one of your favorite things about being a Muppet builder or puppet builder?
I think it's probably just getting to make wonderful things all the time.
Yeah. If you weren't a puppet builder, what would be your career?
I'd be a small animal vet.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, that sounds fun.
I love animals, and I've always, when I was growing up, that wasn't one of the things women could do, but most veterinarians at this point are women.
Yeah.
So I missed the timing. Maybe next lifetime.
Maybe next time, yeah. What is the best piece of advice you've gotten during your career?
I'm not sure if it's the best piece of advice, but it was a Diana Birkenfield quote, and that was, take the money and run. I don't know that it's the best, but
It might not be the best, but it's pretty good.
it was pretty funny.
Good, yeah. Okay, and the last question is, Jerry Nelson said to me once, Sesame Street is great, but always have something that is your own that you create. So, Raleigh Crewson, what is that for you?
I think that's my daughter, Ariana.
I love that. I love that. Do you get to spend a lot of time together?
Not as much as I would like to. She lives in Virginia, but we do spend a lot of time, and we're always on the phone together, as everybody in the shop knows. So
I love that. Well, Raleigh, thank you so much for talking with me today on Below the Frame. I really appreciate it.
thank you, Matt. I had a great time. You're a wonderful host. I have really enjoyed your show. I've listened to all of them. So
Thanks very much.
I have.
Wow.
They're
Well,
great.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Well, you have plenty of time on your commute if you want to listen to them.
I do.
Well, that's it. That's Below the Frame. We're going to be off for 2 weeks, and we will be posting repeat episodes, which you should definitely listen to if you haven't already. And if you have listened to them, maybe re-listen to them. Then we'll be back January 12th with a brand new episode where I go below the frame with David Rudman. Ooh. Get updates and stuff about Below the Frame and Muppets and Sesame Street and, I don't know, pictures of my kids and stuff on my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok accounts at Welcome Matt V. Below the Frame is produced by me. The theme song was written by Stephanie DeBruzzo and performed by my band, The Mighty Weaklings. The podcast artwork was created by Dave Holteen at DaveHolteenDesign.com. Thanks to Rollie Krewson, Bruce Lanoil, Louise Gold, and as always, my son Jack for being a part of this episode. And thanks to you, the fans, for listening. I am Matt Vogel. We will see you next time when we go Below the Frame. Bye-bye.
Go, go, go below the frame.